I feel good, you look great, I like you, I can't wait.
Hi and welcome back to the channel. This is Rideshare Buddy UK and my name's Kevin. And today I'm going to be doing a quick video on something I planned on doing a few weeks ago. And it's about assistance dogs in private hire and rideshare. I'm not going to cover taxis, hackney coaches. This is purely for rideshare and private hire drivers and their requirement to carry assistance dogs. So why am I going to do this now? I planned to do it a few weeks ago, but I never got around to it. But a couple of weeks ago, I had an email from the local council that I'm licensed with, and they were saying how there have been more reports last year about refusal to carry assistance dogs. Well, they said assistance animals, no such thing as an assistant animal under the Disability Act or the Equality Act. But they said they've had more reports of refusals for carrying assistance animals last year than they ever had since the arrival of the Equality Act in 2010. So I'm going to cover assistance dogs, which are covered by the Disability Act, also the Equality Act, what dogs are covered, whether they need training, are dogs in training covered, and what's the difference between an assistance dog, which is covered, and an emotional support animal, which is not covered. So let's get on and have a quick look at some of these, and I'll also give you some examples about how people are quite happy to use the Equality Act to get their pets in cars and in vehicles, and they'll lie, they'll cheat, and they'll deceive. But let's have a look at what the actual wording of the Act says. Now, before I do that, a quick disclaimer. I am not a solicitor. I'm not a lawyer. What I've got is I've done my research. I've contacted various people I know as disability rights campaigners, advocates, a couple of people involved in law. And this is what my interpretation of having those conversations is about the Equality Act 2010 and disability dogs and private hire stroke rideshare vehicles. Right, so what we're looking at is the Equality Act 2010, Section 173, or Chapter 173. And in this chapter, accessibility requirements is dealt with in Section 1675. Assistance dogs. This is the definition of an assistance dog under the Equality Act 2010, and that's what you're required to cover. So assistance dog means a dog which has been trained to guide a blind person. One big thing you've got to notice about this is that blind dogs and hearing or deaf assistance dogs can either be trained by a qualified trainer or recognised organisation, such as Guide Dogs for the Blind. But blind dogs and deaf dogs can also be self-trained by the user. So they can be self-trained or trained by a organisation. And only those two types of dogs can be self-trained. So B, a dog which has been trained to assist a deaf person, self-trained or trained by an organisation. So C, a dog which has been trained by prescribed charity to assist a disabled person who has a disability that consists of epilepsy or otherwise affects a person's mobility, manual dexterity, physical coordination, or ability to lift or carry or otherwise move everyday objects. So you can have trained epilepsy dogs or autism dogs. You can have trained, I'll use this as an example because I'll come back to it later. You can have trained diabetes dogs. They sniff out chemicals in the sweat of a person and can warn them in advance of a diabetic fit or episode. And D, a dog of a prescribed category which has been trained to assist a disabled person who has a disability other than that one falling within paragraph C of a prescribed kind. Don't need to worry about section D. That hasn't been acted at all. There's no dogs of a prescribed category. Everything is really covered by A, B, and C. So D we can forget. But again, it's dogs. But anything in C has to be trained by a recognised charity or recognised training organisation. You cannot self-train an epilepsy assistance dog. You cannot self-train a diabetic assistance dog. You cannot self-train a epilepsy or an autism assistance dog. So only dogs for the blind and dogs for the deaf can be self-trained. Well, I'm not going to go into the further bits because that's about operators, private eye vehicles, and the like. We all know what a private eye operator is. We all know what a private eye vehicle is. So that's the section we're going to be taking a closer look at, and that's the section we're going to be using for what people have as a legal right to bring their assistance dog into your vehicle. Now, there is no defence and ability to stop a person bringing in an assistance dog into your car under religious grounds. Now, I'm saying this because Muslims will say, "Oh, I can't bring in a dog. You can't bring in a dog because it's unclean, it's not accepted, it's against my religion." Well, Islam do treat the saliva of dogs as being unclean, and so most Muslims don't want to bring in pets into the car because it's unclean. However, assistance dogs have been determined by all mainstream Muslim organisations, and the vast majority of conservative Muslim teachers have been classified as guard dogs because they protect the user from harm, they protect them from threat, and they protect them from danger. And as such, they can be classed as guard dogs. Now, the Quran says you can have two types of dogs which are not unclean. One is guard dogs and the other is hunting dogs. So as far as mainstream Muslim teaching is concerned, and even conservative and orthodox Muslim teaching is concerned, assistance dogs are classed as guard dogs and are therefore not unclean. So you've got no excuse under religious grounds to deny an assistance dog access to your vehicle. The only way you can stop a carrying assistance dogs is by getting a medical certificate from your doctor stating that you are allergic to dogs. You then need to present that to the local authority, and they will determine whether to grant you a medical exemption. And that medical exemption is both for you and a specific vehicle. The license that you have to display cannot be transferred between vehicles. There's a registration number on, and only that vehicle and you as a driver are covered. And they'll look at the type of vehicle that you've got. So, for instance, if you've got a black cab where the passenger compartment is sealed off from the driver compartment, you will not be granted your medical exemption certificate because the dog is in a separate compartment. If you've got a saloon without screening, then that saloon will be covered for you as the driver. So it's very specific and quite difficult to get, and you do need a medical doctor certificate to even start the application. Now, if the dog is misbehaving in the car, you have the right to stop the car and ask them to take the dog out and leave the cab. You do have that right if the dog misbehaves while in the car. Properly trained assistance dog will not misbehave. If somebody tries to use the Equality Act as an excuse to get the dog in, and then the dog starts running around on the seats and that, you do have the right to stop the car and ask them to leave. Make sure you have an internal CCTV camera so you've got the evidence to display to any judge, if they do prosecute, that you had concerns about the safety of passengers and other road users. You do have the right to stop if the dog is causing a nuisance. The other thing that you'll get is that people who have emotional support animals will claim it's a disability assistance animal. It is not. It is not covered by Equality Act. You do have the right to deny those. So if somebody brings in a rabbit, there's no such thing as an assistance rabbit. So you can say, no, it's not coming in. You can say, if it's not a properly trained assistance dog, if it's just a pet dog, you can say no. If a customer says, oh, I've got to take my dog with me, I can't go out without it, you can say no. It's an emotional support dog. It is not an assistance dog. Assistance dogs are trained to do an assist for the user. So how can you tell whether it's an assistance dog? Well, you cannot ask the passenger what is wrong with them. That is private medical information that you cannot ask them about. But you are legally entitled to discover if the dog is covered by the Equality Act. And there's only two questions you can ask legally. The first is, what has the dog been trained to do? You're not asking about the passenger's medical condition, you're asking about the training of the dog. So if they say, oh, the dog's been trained to notify me if the doorbell rings, that's the task it's been trained to do, it responds and it helps. And because it's a deaf dog, you don't ask any other question. Same with a blind assistance dog. If you say, well, what has the dog been trained to do? And they say, the dog will help me navigate different obstacles because I can't see. That's fine. It can be self-trained. You don't need to ask another question. If they say, oh, it's a diabetic dog, and it can sniff out changes in the sweat, that must be trained by a recognised charity. So in that situation, if it's not a deaf dog or not a blind dog, you can say, who trained the dog? If they say self-trained, you can say, it's not covered by the Equality Act, I don't need to carry it. So you can do that. Two questions, and only two questions. What is the dog trained to do? And who trained the dog if it's not a blind assistance or deaf assistance dog? So coming back to this diabetic dog that can sniff out changes in sweat levels, and it can warn the user about an oncoming diabetic episode. I worked at a national courier once, and there was a woman there who wanted to bring her pet dog with her, and so she said to the depot manager, "Can I bring my dog during days because it doesn't want to be left alone?" And the manager said, "No, it's not good for the dog to be locked up in a cab of a van all day." So she said, "But it's an assistance dog. I've got diabetes. It helps me with my diabetes control." And this was the first time they'd heard that she was diabetic. So he said, well, I'll contact, because it's a national company, it had a big headquarters and an entire team for human resources. So he said, I'll contact her personnel and take advice. And one of their people came round to the depot and they said, we didn't realise she was diabetic. You've got a diabetes assistance dog. And she goes, yes. And the person goes, well, who trained it? She goes, oh no, I'm training it myself. And immediately she said, well, that's not covered by the Equality Act, and we don't feel it's good for the dog to be left in the van, so we're not going to allow you to bring it to work. And she said, but about your diabetes, we didn't realise you was diabetic, and you try driving a van 8-10 hours a day. What records do you keep? Now, you can be a professional driver and have diabetes, but by law, you must take your sugar readings immediately before you start your test and record it, before you start your shift and record it, and then do it every 3 hours and record that, so that if there's an accident, the police can investigate your compliance with sugar levels, etc. She goes, oh yeah, I'll take it. I'll take my test, but I don't record it down. If I go high, I just stop work. And the personnel officer said, well, that's not the way you've got to do it. You've got to keep your records. And she goes, well, I don't really have a pen and paper at hands half the time, so I don't really bother doing it. I just do my test. So they went out and they bought her this fancy new piece of kit, which does all electronic testing, and she takes a blood test and it records it all automatically. And they said, you've got to do it every 3 hours. And within a week, she'd left the job and found another job. Now, you tell me, was she really diabetic or did she just want to bring a pet with her? Well, I'm not going to prejudge. I'll leave that for you to decide on. But it does show that people who own a dog are more interested in getting themselves what they want than they are in the law. Now, they will lie, they will take advantage, they'll say, oh, it's diabetic dog, it's assistance dog. But you do have the right to question what the dog is trained to do and who trained the dog. And then you have to make a judgment. Now, properly trained, fully trained dogs are what are covered by the Equality Act. Dogs in training are not. So if it's a dog that's not been fully trained, you can deny that if it's in training. Personally, I would allow a dog in training into the car. They don't get to the stage of going into cars until they've been properly well trained, until they've been house trained. They're not going to mess up your car. They're being trained to sit immediately at the feet of the user. And that's important to realise. That's one of the signs of a properly, fully trained assistance dog, is that when the user gets in, the dog will immediately sit at the feet in the floor well. It will not jump on seats. It will not bark, yap, saliva all over the place. It will very gently come into the car and go straight onto the floor. If it does anything else but that, you then can say, I'm not sure that that's an assistance dog. Make sure you got your CCTV to show that it's jumping around and barking and yapping or whatever it is, or just generally being a bit of a nuisance. Then you can say, no, you'll have to leave the car. Also, make sure you got your outward CCTV, because if you're pulling up to a stop and assistance dog is straining at the leash, jumping up at people, jumping, yapping, generally being a bit unruly, that's not a trained assistance dog, and that can be used for evidence should they decide to prosecute, because you need to prove that you believe that that was not an assistance dog. And you can only do that through the activities and actions of the dog. And for that, you need CCTV. So internal and external CCTV can provide you with the evidence you need to protect yourself. The other thing you've got to realise is that the act covers the dog. So it doesn't mean that the user has to be with the dog. It may be that the user of the dog, the normal user of the dog, is in hospital, and the dog, the assistance dog, is being cared for by a relative or a neighbour and is being taken to the hospital. The dog still has the right to go into the taxi or the rideshare vehicle. It doesn't have to be on duty. It doesn't have to be with the user. As long as it's an assistance dog, it is covered. So a neighbour could be taking it to the vet for treatment. It's covered. It has the right to come into the vehicle. It will still have to behave and act like an assistance dog in that it goes onto the floor, well, directly onto the floor, and doesn't jump around on the seats or anything like that. So that's no problem. So that's it really. I mean, it's quite specific, this Equality Act is. It relates to dogs only. No such thing as an assistance parrot, snake, gerbil, hamster, rabbit, cat. None of these are covered by the Equality Act. None of them have the right to come in the car. Only assistance dogs that are fully trained and has been trained to do a duty. If it's for blind people, if it's for deaf people, it can be self-trained. If it's for any other disability, it must be trained by a recognised charity to be covered by the Equality Act. So that's it. I mean, I'm no big fan of pets. I don't allow animals in my car. I do, and I'm more than happy to allow assistance dogs in. They are fantastic creatures. They're so well trained, and they help people lead a much better quality of life. The last thing they need are drivers to tell them they can't come in the car because of their dog. But any other type of dog, I'm not interested. It doesn't come in my car. I no support at all for emotional support animals. They don't come in my car. Pets don't come in my car. Certainly farm animals don't come in my car. Only assistance dogs, as determined by the Equality Act 2010, come into my car. Now, some people say, the disabled people say, as a taxi driver or private eye driver, you've got to make reasonable adjustments for my disability. And if I want to bring my pet rabbit in, you've got to allow me to bring my pet rabbit in. No, you don't. There is no provision in the law for them to demand it. It's a reasonable change you can make. You may not decide it's reasonable to allow a cat or a dog into your car unless it's trained to behave correctly once it's in the car. And pets aren't trained correctly. You've got no idea as to whether that rabbit is going to mess up your seat, scratch at your seat. It's not reasonable to expect you to allow an emotional support animal in. It is perfectly reasonable to allow you to expect you to have a disabled assistance dog that has been trained to sit down in the floor well of a car and cause no problems and no nuisance and no danger to your driving. That's reasonable. Pets are not reasonable. So that's it for today. I hope that's a little bit clearer. Don't get bullied into taking animals that you don't need to take. The Equality Act is very specific as to what is covered regarding dogs, and you have the right to protect your own space and your own car from pets. So that's it. Until next time, hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe and share. And until next time, safe driving and continue to make a profit on Uber if it's possible.